right, good evening, everybody. I will go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Yeah.
You should have received an email from the town attorney earlier today advising that there is a need to go into a brief closed session under section 2.23711A for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters relating to a VDOT transportation project. So with that, I will ask for a motion to amend the agenda to include this closed meeting and that the agenda be so amended. Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, that motion carries and the agenda is so amended. Later in the meeting, I'll ask for the motion to actually go into the closed session. We have several presentations next week. The Good Neighbor Award, the certificate of support to recognize Jennifer Taylor, who is Mrs. Herndon, a proclamation to recognize Distracted Driving Awareness Month, and a proclamation to recognize Local Government Education Week. And let me see, I think I have who's reading this. Barbara Blakis will introduce the winners of the Good Neighbor Award on behalf of the Cultivating Community. Ms. Herndon and her family will be here next weekend. Is that you, Jennifer? Or you? Or I guess it's not a proclamation, it's just a certificate. So we can, okay, we can work that out. And then, no, Distracted Driving Awareness Month is Baker and Local Government Education is Owen. So does that sound right to everyone? Okay. All right, if there's no discussion on those, we'll move right into our public hearings. There are several, but they're pretty straightforward. The first one is an ordinance to approve a fourth lease amendment to the APC Realty and Equipment Company LLC at the town's 3rd Street Water Tower. And I will recognize Tammy Chastain for the staff report.
Hello, good evening. This first one is for Sprint, essentially, at the 3rd Street water tank. They are removing some antennas, replacing 3 antennas, making them actually a little bit smaller, lowering the other 3, and then removing some other various equipment that's associated with the antennas. This does not change their lease in any way. It keeps it the same. So.
All right. Are there any questions or comments for Tammy on that one? Bill?
Just for edification, this is cellular equipment. This is an upgrade from, say, 4 to 5 years. It's still within the guidelines of what currently is.
I believe this is still within the guidelines.
Okay. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? No. All right. Thank you very much. The next one is similar, to approve a second lease amendment to Cellco Partnership, doing business as Verizon Wireless at the same water tower. And it's, I believe it's you again, Tammy.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. This one, yeah. So this one is Verizon. They are actually replacing all of 7 antennas, as well as some of the miscellaneous equipment and cables that go with. So still staying within what they had up there.
Yep.
And no change to the lease at all.
Okay.
Yes.
Any questions or comments on that one? Yes, ma'am.
Question. Do you notify all the neighbors when these things are happening? Because I know we've had some neighbors.
Not typically. We do for like the project that we had to rehab the tank, but not usually. We don't.
And they go at different times. They don't necessarily go at the same time.
They do.
Okay.
We keep them to work the normal day hours.
Okay.
Is what we ask them to do. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Sydney?
Is there any reason that they gave you for what the change that they're making? Is it just updating?
Just upgrading equipment. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
They do it now, they probably don't have it.
Okay, I meant to mention that bids are not required for these amended leases, and that both of these items will require a roll call vote next week. And while we are on the subject of 3rd Street Water Tower, someone inquired a week or so ago about the additional towers that are there right now.
Yes.
They are temporary because they're doing work on the tower, so that if you get questions about that, the extra poles that are there now will come down once the repair work is done on the tower, so that's not a permanent change.
I do have a little update.
Sure.
So our thoughts are that at least one of the towers should be coming down next week.
Okay.
And then the other one, obviously, there's 4 providers at that tank that had to move their stuff off the tank and then back on the tank, so they do it one at a time. So the last one, T-Mobile is going this week, their tower would be gone hopefully next week, on the schedule for next week. And then we plan on AT&T starting the next week, and they're the last ones.
All right, thanks for that quick update. Sure. All right, any other questions before we move on?
It would be kind of fun having like Sprint, Verizon, and AT&T have a water tower battle.
I think they are. The next several items are sort of related, but we are going to look at them separately. The first one is an ordinance to approve the assignment of a power utility easement to Virginia Electric and Power Company doing business in Virginia as Dominion Energy Virginia for transportation facility improvements for the Herndon Metro Rail access improvements along Herndon Parkway, the property that is owned by Kidder Herndon Station LLC. This will require a roll call vote next week, and I will recognize Laurie Sigler, and I believe John Irish will be collaborating here on the staff report.
Well, good evening. I only have 3 items on the agenda for this week, as opposed to 11 the last time, so I'm whittling it down.
Laurie, if you don't mind, did you want to do concurrent staff reports on these 3? Does that make sense?
I think it would be okay to do that, and then we have to have separate public hearings.
Right, next week. So that's item 7, 8, and 9. Is that the 3? Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't think of that, so go right ahead.
Yeah, so they're similar in the sense that these are easements that the town has acquired. The number 7 on the agenda from Kidder Herndon, that was part of the bus base project. And the other 2, 8 and 9, Norris and Winstead, were for the Van Buren Street project. So the town did acquire the easements on behalf of Dominion. And now, since we have secured title to the parcels under 7 and 8, we now need to assign them and convey those easement rights to Dominion. And as soon as Dominion gets those assignments, they can begin the actual relocation work. We are postponing the last item, number 9, on Winstead. Did you want me
You're
to
well
go?
aware, it's been included in your last 2 dispatches,
Yeah,
but we'd be happy
right.
to answer any questions about that one. It was the deed that had been recorded in the interim between our title and our actual filing of the certificate.
Right, so we're just postponing that one, that'll come on a future agenda. So, again, I don't know if you need more information, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
And technical, John Irish is here to let you know exactly how large those Dominion areas are, what they're doing.
Okay, do you guys want that information proactively? Do you have questions? I'm gonna save it for the public meeting. Everybody's like, the poll's closed, we want to get home and see what happened. So any questions on these items? Yes, ma'am.
Is that what people are out doing now as we speak on Van
Not
Buren,
Dominion,
on the
but
other
yes,
side?
it is utility
relocation.
relocation, but it's not
Doing
Dominion.
that.
No.
It's fiber, the fiber work, not Dominion,
Okay.
but it's.
This
Well,
has
there
to
should
happen
be a lot of this
before
going on.
Dominion can do their same work.
Yes, so is the information that you would be giving us the same information that you gave us on the other easements?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't need to know anymore.
Just now we're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so next week, do we want to plan for concurrent staff reports and then, so we can have questions, and then we'll have separate public hearings and roll call votes on each item?
Makes the most sense.
Except for number 9, you're not gonna hear that one? Or they think they'll have that by then?
It
No,
will
it will
not
not be
change,
ready
it
by
will
then.
not be.
Right, so we're not gonna do that,
No.
okay.
But because it was advertised, we need to
Right.
continue to carry
So
it.
we'll open the public hearing and we'll have to continue it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, all right. Well, we zipped right through that, and here's the big ticket item, a discussion on our FY '21 budget, and our town manager is here to facilitate the discussion.
As well as the ladies.
The budget team, right.
Ladies.
And everyone, the council, everyone has had their budget meetings already, is that
No,
right?
I had to delay two because
Okay.
of illness and work conflict.
Gotcha, okay.
So,
All right,
so it'll be new to two.
Coronavirus is thinking.
Oh, geez. Well, now they'll be super prepared for their meeting.
Remote access.
All right.
Let me see where she hide it.
Yeah, I was under the impression we were meeting together, but it turned out that it was Bill Ashton,
I was called.
a different Bill.
That's right. Duty called. So as you recall, last year, we changed the process up a little bit. Rather than waiting until the beginning, March 30th, release a full-blown budget with all the bells and whistles. And you would see it for the first time in its full regalia then. We came with what we call the budget batter, what was going into the cake at the beginning of March in the discussion item, to kind of walk you through where the budget is heading as far as the formulation goes. A lot of these numbers, again, before my recommended budget comes out, are not yet finalized. They're very close to being finalized. We're working in some of the margins right now, but this gives you an understanding of the puts and takes the budget team went through to craft the budget as we move forward. And so just as a way of introduction, drawing you back to the beginning of January, unless those sides so I don't keep turning. Beginning of January, you all created for me a budget resolution with several topics in there. They included commitment and investment in the town employees you thought was very important, and also advancing the 2035 vision in the particular areas of technology and transportation funding, because we're seeing the shortfalls that we had discussed and we continue to discuss. And we have downtown redevelopment coming up and a few other things, and we wanted to make sure we were adequately prepared for those as well. We also have worked very hard to get a strong fiscal position, financial position in terms of levels of capital, AAA bond ratings, things of that nature. And so you all were very interested in us continuing policies and process that would shore up those positions. So that includes prudent use of fund balance, conservative budgeting, that sort of thing. And by conservative, I mean when we look at revenue estimates, it's a guess as to what year the revenues are going to do. We take the short end of the guess, not the long end of the guess necessarily. And things like B-poll, which is notoriously volatile, we tend to leave some of that on the table because we don't know if it's coming in or not. So there's some risk there, and we try to control for that risk. So the process moving forward was the initial departmental budget submissions that occurred December, January timeframe. And then when we got those in consolidating, we were looking at approximately a gap of about $4.5 million between what projected revenues to come in at and what these various departmental funding requests were. We went through a prioritization exercise as a budget team. We reconciled that with the departments. And by the way, the prioritization that we asked for that from the department. So as you're looking at the various new initiatives, give me a sense of how important these are to you. Is it mission critical, or is it something that if all things are great and we have a few extra dollars laying around, we'd like to do? So we took that level of information and we conducted then we put together the budget. We started conducting our individual council briefings with you all that most of you all had last week, 2 members notwithstanding. And so we move forward. Themes that govern these discussions that I think are very important to point out. Something we've talked about time and time again, the revenues remain flat for the most part. Expenditures are growing. We have a very hot economy, hot labor markets, hot markets for construction materials, hot markets for any commodities that hit O&M. So this is just naturally what occurs in a strong economy. But in a strong economy, it would behoove us to look at things like, what have we deferred maintenance-wise? Why? We need to step up and cook those things off the books now, as opposed to trying to do it in a weaker economy. And also wages is a very significant thing. What are we doing for our employees in the workforce? And we have done quite a bit of adjustment to react to market forces over the past year and 18 months. How can we solidify that and make sure we don't lose the ground we've gained in those areas? We also saw significant increases in healthcare costs, which is a national phenomenon, and also in retirement costs. We're part of the Virginia retirement system. Every 2 years they redo their actuarial analyses of this, and they give us how much money we're going to have to contribute to retirements for the next 2 years. And that was another sizable hit. Can't avoid it. It has to happen. We continued the effort that we've been doing before, taking maintenance and other operational expenditures out of the CIP. Anything with re in front of it, repaving, replacement, vehicle replacement, anything that would be some work on a current piece of capital or replacing a current piece of capital. We wanted to operationalize that as opposed to trying to do it as part of the capital improvement, which should be adding capital to the stock or adding assets to the town. And we wanted to break those two up. The other theme that kind of grew is, and it really dawned on me when I started seeing the amount of technology requests that were coming in. We have new leadership in critical points of this organization, and they're hungry for data. They're hungry to use data to drive decision making. They want to get out of oh, we knew this one time a long time ago. They want to get out of this knowledge management in one's brain into something that would be more useful and more drive them to better decision making moving forward. And so those new leaders put in quite a bit of requests for technology related efforts next year to meet those emerging demands. So let's start with the highlights of the general fund. Just to remind you, general fund is one of the several funds we'll talk about. Water and sewer is a standalone business, as is golf and cemetery. We'll talk about those as well, but let's start with the general fund. So this is the tax-funded activities of the town. Real estate, which makes up 33.4% of our revenue base, saw an assessment growth of about 4.69%. This 4.69% was primarily driven off of commercial real estate. But if you control for the size, if you weight it for the size of its contribution to the general fund, we're talking about a 1.56% increase to the general fund expenditures out of real estate, natural real estate growth. If you look at what the CPIU is doing this year, if you look at what projected inflation this year, it's not keeping up. And that's going to be an important factor as we move later when we see slight decrease is going to become a theme in the others. And by the way, that's a statistically insignificant decrease. It's a flat number, to be brutally honest with you. The commercial residential split continues to be 44-56 in that ballpark where we've been for years and years. That's an envious position to be in because those two assessment markets move at various levels and various times. It keeps you from getting too much of a sugar rush when things are great. It keeps you from having too much of a floor if they should fall, because one usually buoys the other in a certain sense. As you're looking at that split, it's why we are an employment center. It's part of who we are. It's that 44% commercial split that gives us our restaurants in town. We have 120 restaurants because we have a robust lunch traffic out of the commercial side of our real estate market to go with our residential side of the real estate market. So with this and the various other decreases we're talking about, we are going to propose a 1 cent increase at 27.5 cents per $100 of assessed value. That would create $465,000 in recurring revenue as part of that increase. That will help us offset the difference between the budget growth number based on the assessments and where the actual economy is going. But you also have to remember too, is real estate tax is a lagging indicator. So the economy might be going hot, real estate's lagging behind. We're living the cost increases of the hot economy without reaping some of the benefits that would come with a more robust tax base as a result of it. So with this in mind, especially when you start looking at other local government taxes, 36% of our general fund comes from meals tax, comes from transient lodging and sales tax. Those three elements make up that. We are projecting a slight decrease. It's in the margins, probably statistically insignificant, but it will be a downtick. As you look at the companion piece of material I think we gave to you, did we give you anything additional? Okay. Well, let's keep going. We'll get that additional information to you. You'll see it's just marginal decreases. Intergovernmental is 11% of our revenue stream. Intergovernmental also, these are grants, these are payments from the county to do certain things, payments from the state to do certain things. We're looking at that to also slightly decrease next year. Charges for service. This is where we're seeing a lot of activity. We are asking to increase the solid waste fee to $16 per quarter. Reason being is that will generate $180,000, which will offset the $210,000 increase that we were seeing in our tipping fees. So when we go to take refuse to the transfer stations, when we go to take recycling in, what it charges us to get rid of our waste has been increased by $210,000 over last year. This solid waste fee will will attempt to keep pace with those tipping fees. Again, this is still one of the best deals we have going. If you had to put this out in the private market, you're nowhere near $16 a quarter for refuse and recycling. Again, we still are picking up as part of the general fund all the equipment. We're still picking up all the personnel used as part of the tax, as part of our taxes. but we need to make an adjustment here, at least to offset the cost to get rid of the stuff we pick up. Pivoting to personnel in the general fund. So let's come out of revenues, let's go to expenditures. Personnel makes up 67% as of last count. 67% of our general fund is personnel, which makes sense. We are a public service-oriented operation, so we provide service to the community, so it takes people to do that levels of service, so that's why it is so heavily weighted in that way. Of that 70%, or 67%, 70% of that is between police and public works operations staff. So a vast majority of our personnel are frontline personnel that are interacting with our community every single day. And there are other, as you start adding Parks and Rec in that does a lot of frontline work, now you're getting up over the 85%. So really, we are an organization that is truly devoted, we are facing forward and facing our customers each and every day. So with this in mind, we are asking to do a similar wage adjustment as we did last year, a 1.3% market rate adjustment to wages, COLA for those it's for those that know that parlance. Except COLAs tend to be tied to CPI. This is not. It's a 1.3 market rate adjustment, which is an important number that we'll get to in a second. And we're also looking at an average 2.0 pay for performance adjustment. So based on your annual review, if you get exceptional, you probably get up to 2.5. If you do very good, you might get 1.5. So it's a range between those two numbers with an average shooting at 2.0. As I said earlier, retirement was up $286,000. That's because the contribution rate rose from 6.67 to 8.34. This is something done where the VRS looks at the stock market and says we're not getting the yields we're looking for, we need contributions increased. As part of an actuarial analysis they do twice every other year, and they've sent that in to us. We're also seeing health insurance costs up by 9.5%. That's a $265,000 hit to us coming into this year. Now what we are proposing, and this is something that's going to be relatively new for us, we have three plans that we have. We have two plans that are on a higher tier than the third plan. The third plan on the little bit lower tier is still a quality plan. All three are great plans. But the contribution rate for employees is the same regardless if you're on the lower or higher tiers. So we're asking for anybody on the higher tiers will get an increase of their employee contribution to their health care of 5%. That will then offset some of the health insurance cost creep and make the net increase actually $130,000 by doing this. Yes.
So on the retirement, is that a DC, DB, or hybrid?
Yes. So Plan 1 and Plan 2 is a full defined benefit plan. The hybrid plan, which was new as of July 1st, 2014, is half defined contribution, half defined benefit.
Okay.
But the employer piece is still applicable to both.
Yep.
But as you know, the hybrid plan is overall cheaper.
Yep.
And so as the Plan 1s and Plan 2s retire, you know, you'll have more of a workforce on the hybrid.
That's why I was asking, because DBs are much more expensive than DCs.
Yes.
And this is something that's been occurring with VRS over the past several years where they're trying to move people from one to the other.
Yep.
And so again, we have three plans that we actually administer in a given year.
Which is fun for administrative costs.
Which is always fun, and our HR department loves it, trust me.
Yep.
Danny's not here, is she? Darting, glancing looks.
Bill,
So, yes.
Given that the cost is the same for the employee, why would an employee at this point ever choose a non-Cadillac type plan? You said that employee contribution is the same.
Well, the employee contributions for all three currently are the same. So the two upper tier and the two middle tier, let's call it, we pay the same rates as far as the employee pays so much, the town pays so much in terms of percentage. What we're trying to do it's a percentage question.
Okay.
Yes. So what we're trying to do is take 5% and offload that to the employees with the thought of, and get it to them in enough time to where they can react to open season to drop down to the lower plan, or they can stay at the upper plan, and that's fine. And we have calculated to where the 1.3% MRA in our lowest pay scales will offset that cost difference. So it'll still be, they won't get the functional MRA involved in this, but it will be a no difference to them in their paycheck. Or if they want to realize the MRA, they drop back to the lower tiered health plan, and we go and pick up the higher amount, the higher percentage of the contribution. So this was a mechanism to try to, and also if you think about it, it's those two higher tier plans that are truly driving our cost increases right now. Mainly because that's where everybody is, but also too because they're feature rich. And so with that in mind, you're seeing that's what's causing this increase in the past 2 years. That's where it's the true drivers behind it. So we're trying to eliminate some of the stress on that system by incenting employees to drop down and realize, you know, realize the 1.3 MRA that we're planning to give. Okay. The next bullet is something that's also very important that we need to keep in consideration. We are looking to move the pay scales, not the pay scales by 5%. And this is for market competitiveness. What we're finding is we're bringing more and more employees in towards the top end of the scale because we're in competition for them. And then they top out in their scale in a couple of years. And that creates problems for them leaving. It creates problems. It creates other stressors on the environment. Top of scale bonuses go up and various other things. We've watched other local governments over the years move the scales, and we've moved them a little bit in the past few years, but not as dramatic as this. And we're looking to do about a 5% increase this year. We may be back next year to move it again. Again, this is something Tanya and I are keeping a very close eye on. We monitor the market, we monitor what our vacancies are doing, how they're being portrayed out there, what other jurisdictions and other private sectors, because we're getting a lot of our people from the private sector, are doing for various skill sets. And we're trying to make sure that we're positioning ourselves to get quality people in the fold. The other thing we're looking to do is freeze 4 vacant positions, and we're repurposing a couple others. By freezing, I mean recently we just had an IT position become open. I have a pretty significant request from IT to do some GIS work. So we're going to freeze that IT position while we get consultants in to do the GIS work we need to do, and pay for it with that frozen position. So they're still being very active, they're still getting after it. And then when it's over, we're gonna examine, is that IT position positioned in the best place? Or do we need to change the job descriptions, change how we're approaching, how we look at this, and make some adjustments, and we'll take that decision downfield. But for right now, they'll be frozen. Repurposing other positions is something that we've been doing for a while. As a position comes open, the standing order is we pull it, we don't put it out on the street right away. We examine this, we examine the duties. Do they still meet the job description? Are they still applicable to the town? Because many of these jobs were created 25 years ago. So are they still applicable to what we're doing? Do we have a need that's greater than that need that we need to meet? Case in point, we had a vacant AP position and a vacant custodian that we both realized we didn't really need anymore. Now we have a risk manager. We took those 2 positions, created a risk manager because that was a glaring need, glaring hole in the operation. And so we made that happen with repurposing positions. We're looking at doing the same here. There's a position, 2 positions at the shop we're looking to repurpose moving forward. We already have our eye to do this, to meet some really emerging needs that are very at the fore, and getting rid of position descriptions that really are no longer applicable to how we operate. O&M, we're seeing increases in refuse. We're seeing increases in recycling activities. The things I just talked about before that caused a really large increase in our O&M side. Things like increases in contract services. This is what I was talking about, new directors that are looking for better ways to do business. We want to get new permitting and planning software because we want to get out of paper permitting. We want to get out of paper plan review. We want to get to electronic submissions and electronic plan, the whole plan operation being electronically driven. We want to create a pay-by-phone system with multiple language capabilities. If you want to give us your money, I want to be able to communicate with you. I don't care how we communicate with you, I want your money. Let's get it. And so we have a new finance director that's looking at things through that lens. We're seeing increases in professional service for stormwater management best practices. This was something that was identified to you all not too long ago, where we have a screaming need to inventory our stormwater management system and get a sense for where we are, where we're not meeting our requirements, and getting after that sort of activity. So we're seeing increases in professional services for that. Other increasements in investments in technologies, GIS, CityWorks, that's an asset management system the shop uses. It also powers their work orders. We want to do more with it. And again, this comes with, when we got Tammy on board, certified asset management professional that she is. She does have that behind her name. That did jump off the resume when I saw that resume come through. These are things we want to be able to feed that level of expertise and use it to our benefit. And we want to continue to address the right sizing of life cycle maintenance and replacement. As we're trying to get these things out of capital and get them into operational expenses, we want to be able to address demands on that system in a proactive way and continue to tack in that direction. Non-departmental general fund related things. We took the cash donations line item out of the clerk's budget. Never really understood why it was there. It was a pretty silly place for it. And we put it in non-departmental. We also are putting in a placeholder number for what it costs to operate Friday Night Live in the winter market from a town perspective. And we're going to put that as a line item in a non-departmental budget for us to monitor. We're trying to give you the right transparency on what things cost. And that is this is one line item where that is very key for us to make sure you understand what it costs to run those events. We also increased the contingency budget from $40,000 to over $100,000. One of the reasons is we absorbed some other departmental contingencies into the general fund contingency fund. And if you recall, we have a multi-tiered contingency operation where we hold $100,000 in the general fund, and that's for the one-off $20,000 overages on, say, not necessarily this year, but say snow removal. And we can move it and cover snow removal with it. We can move it in various ways. If we have a major contingency, we have a capital contingency reserve that I would come to you to move money out of the capital contingency reserve to meet major contingency related issues. Interfund. What interfund is general fund money that gets shipped out to other funds to fund certain activities. So we did similar to last year. If you recall, last year we raised the meals tax 1%, and it was to fund capital-related expenditures. So we are pushing the same amount of money out in the general fund this year, out of the general fund this year, which is a percentage on the meals tax about $970,000, give or take. We're pushing that out into the downtown parking fund, which is a debt service line item related to the downtown redevelopment project, and we're looking to push $777,000 to the CIP fund to fund. This isn't all the CIP for next year. Some things are funded out of grant funding and other funding streams. This is general fund contributions to the CIP. Police server room HVAC, $300,000. We have a major HVAC problem that looks to threaten our information technology investment in the police. We're looking to address that issue. We're looking at adding $300,000 into the town security initiative. Phone systems upgrades. Just to let you know, the last time we did a phone systems upgrade, I think I did it. And I remember nothing about anything technology related in my brain. That's been squeezed out of my brain. So that's a long time ago. And then sidewalks and minor trails, we took $121,000 out of the general fund, as you're going to see in a few minutes. That we're marrying that with a reserve that will fully fund sidewalks and minor trails for next year. We'll get to that presently. We anticipate no new debt for FY 2021. And we removed reserve for future debt service from the budget. It was $283,500. The reason being is we did some financial policy changes prior to going to New York for bond ratings, and we did a surplus allocation to a capital reserve fund that covers that. So that will act in that capacity instead of doing this and that. We're doing the policy as opposed to the policy plus. Pivoting to water and sewer. Water and sewer is, let's jump to operations and maintenance first, and we'll go back to revenue second. We had a 7.2% increase in operations costs. Reason being is water costs, the commodity costs are up $300,000. Again, the people we buy this water from are much higher, have much higher rates than we do. The people we buy our sewage capacity from have much higher rates than we do. It's something that was identified, and as we're looking at how the business is run, again, this is an enterprise fund, fully functional by user fees. We have to increase water usage fees 5% next year and sewer usage fees 10% next year, just to keep pace. This was part of a long-term Davenport study that we were operating under until we saw this $300,000 hit. And then we're recalibrating that right now, and we're projecting that that's what's going to make it into the final budget submission, those increases. Professional services for Davenport to do that sort of work, $20,000. We are going to we're applying some of the city works costs that are associated with the water and sewer fund to the water and sewer fund, as well as we have to do some SCADA updates. That's just the telemetry around water and sewer. And those are about 91,000. Those are some of the cost drivers in the fund. Capital, we're seeing a big capital increase, 77.5%. The reason being is we have about $5 million in projects. For last year we had about 3. We are upsizing Springdown watershed. We are rehabilitating some large sewer conveyance pipes. Very important on this one, because if groundwater gets into those pipes, we pay to have groundwater treated. So we like to make sure we have a very robust, what's called I&I program that addresses those things before they become a problem. We don't want groundwater in our sewer pipes. And it happens, but we need to address it and get on top of it as soon as we know that's an issue. We have some sewer force main design and construction. We have the water transmission main that we need to run, and we have some other water systems improvements for $2.4 million. Those are very smaller projects that add up to $2.4 million. These are much needed to handle the additional capacity that we have purchased. So if you're looking at some of the water projects up there, we purchased capacity. We have figured out how Fairfax is going to pump to us. Fairfax Water is going to pump to us, but now we need to prepare to receive it. And several of these projects are meant to do that. Golf course and cemetery, both enterprise funds, 2 separate enterprise funds, all operational off of the revenue they generate out of their operation. The golf fund, again, remains self-supporting, which is an anomaly. If you read municipal, if you read any municipal magazine focused on municipal governance or whatever, municipal golf courses are a loser a lot of times. I mean, you see a lot of tax dollars or they close going into this. As a matter of fact, I do occasionally get calls from developers wanting your golf course, you're throwing a lot of money. No, it's self-sufficient. I have to turn them over to the financial audit before they will believe that this is a self-supporting operation.
And before Facebook goes crazy, the golf course is going nowhere.
It's going nowhere.
Just making sure everyone knows that.
So the personnel over there will receive the same projected increases we talked to the rest of the town. But other than that, revenue and expense projections remain relatively flat. Gene does not have any capital requests for 2021. And quite frankly, with all this said, he'll probably end up with a small contribution to retained earnings by the end of the year, is what we're projecting. If he gets a year like this one next year, a winter like this one next year, Katie bar the door, because again, he's doing very well. Cemetery fund also remains self-supporting. They also will receive the same personnel increases that the rest of the staff will realize. Their overall expense is mainly driven off of capital, an 11% increase. They want to do some things over there like brick pavers on the paths. The paths he wants to replace are woefully in need. We don't need to create customers by tripping over bricks that need to be replaced. We have some tree removal in some Culver area also planned for up there. As I've said in the individual meetings, stay tuned. We are, as Dave said in this room a few weeks ago, we're about 4 years away from being fully sold out there. He does have expansion plans. We're in the very early stages of kind of mapping out fiscally and operationally how that's going to occur. So we're just in the very, very, very preliminary stages. That will be a topic as we move forward. So guidelines for general fund reductions. When we looked at these varying departmental requests, what we were looking at are things like, is there a way, is this really needed right now, or can it wait? Is it time right now, or is it not? If it's not, we were looking for delaying funding. We partially funded things because we've spread out things over a couple fiscal years. We have an expansion to the automated refuse system. They want to do smaller containers, smaller toters in, was it townhouse areas? Was that correct? I remember that. Big ask for this year, but if we're not going to get to it day one. If we get to it in the second half of the fiscal year, and we do half this year, do half next fiscal year, we can do it as one continuous project without a problem. So we looked at doing that. We looked at repurposing funds that were no longer in a certain area of our business that was not truly meeting emerging needs. We looked for repurposing. We did very careful review of historical spending patterns and adjusted spending based on historical spending patterns. If we saw growth outside of the norm, why? And is there another way to look at this question? And so we went after things in that way. And then we also took into account the department prioritization I talked about earlier. The department submitted their budgets, submitted a list of priorities, which, as I was reminded earlier today, when I asked them to rank 1 to 18, it's hard to do. So, I mean, they had different strategies, but still got the message across to us as to what was important to the departments and what was less important to the departments. Same thing with capital. We saw reductions in capital spending, included, we delayed some requested projects, mainly because we didn't think the time was right. We partial funded some initiatives. We altered the planned transition to the re-expenditure, so the re-paving, the equipment replacement, that sort of thing, the maintenance sort of functions. And we kind of, because I think we went too fast the previous year, we kind of slowed it down a bit, and we're more slowly transitioning that out of capital into the general fund. Non-departmental, we made adjustments to contingencies. Again, rather than self-insuring every operation all throughout the general fund, we grabbed those little excess dollars off these various operations, consolidated them into an overall general fund contingency plan that is accessible if they need it. Because again, it's not efficient for everybody to plan for a contingency, because they're all not going to occur. So we took some adjustments in the non-departmental contingencies, and we also, like I said earlier, removed the reserve for debt obligations because they were already satisfied with other town policies and practices. CIP recommended reductions, general fund. These were what the Planning Commission is giving to me, and then I'm going to come and recommend to you. I dropped the town security initiative by $150,000. We have a prioritized plan in front of us. We're looking at it. I think $300,000 still gets us very, very far down that prioritization path. And again, we'll re-examine that plan, reallocate priorities, and then this is a multi-year project, as we've talked about before. So we're not in a race to get it all done right now, but we want to take a more of a measured approach, and that's what we're trying to do. Metro Promenade Concepts, I pulled out at $400,000. This is a perplexing question. You have two developers up there developing at two different times. You have one with a development plan in. You have another that looks to hold his or her property for, again, the foreseeable future. Do we need to do this right now? And do we have enough staff capacity to do it right now? We're decisively engaged in a lot of different areas, and can we pull this off too? I was uncomfortable with allocating this and being able to deliver something by the end of the year. So pulled that out. Sidewalks and minor trails, we reduced the general fund by $154, but we have a designated reserve for that project. And that will go back into fully fund sidewalks and minor trails for next year. So we'll take the designated reserve and apply it with the 121 we are allocating from the general fund. And together, they make 275, which will fund the project completely. One of the things I kept reminding folks during this is we have a lot of future unknowns. We have a very dynamic environment right now. There are some big things that are outside of our control that we need to be cognizant of. Things like coronavirus.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's something that not only do we have to deal with it as a business continuity and a force protection question, but how will that affect the economy? And these numbers, even our conservative numbers coming in on time. We can survive the first year of a major downturn because we've built those capacities. We've built those sustainable capacities into our overall fiscal picture. But how are we going to react if it's a 2, 3, or 4-year turnaround? So these are things that are on the fore of our mind. How that develops is going to most likely shape a lot of our financial decisions moving forward. We have two collective bargaining bills down in the General Assembly. If the collective bargaining bill goes through without a local choice option, which is the House version, that will mean that there's a good chance we may see that here. That will significantly affect how we operate. I've sent you all memos on that. Yes.
Did you get the thing from Senator Boyce?
Yes, I did. I did see that. Again, until the votes are counted and the governor's signature's on a piece of paper, I still remain skeptical. Not to say that I don't have faith and confidence in our senator, but I do until I see a
Well, we
governor's
have to
signature.
plan for
Have to
what might
plan
be out
for
there.
us.
Just 39 others
Yeah.
have to worry about.
And it would be an immediate hit to our general fund in preparation for it.
Yep.
And it would be a significant impact once the CBA is negotiated.
On the upside, we should know before
Adoption.
Before adoption.
100%. But this is still very much was on the budget team's mind, on my mind. I shared it with you when I could. So it's just something we need to keep thinking about. Transportation cost increases. Again, the economy is causing materials increases everywhere. So cost of labor is up, cost of skilled labor is up, the things we talked about here, land acquisition. We had to acquire that land, that cost was up. The cost of utility relocation is up. So all these things are affecting overall costs of transportation initiatives we have going on, 3 of which are critical to the metro. And if we want to have traffic even remotely flowing on that end of town, we can't have cars stopping in the middle of Herndon Parkway to discharge passengers, bus bays. We got to do something with that intersection at the corner of Herndon Parkway and Van Buren. We got to do something with that Van Buren stretch coming out down to the Herndon Parkway. We got to do something with the Spring Street intersection of Herndon Parkway. If we don't do that, we have a standstill with Metro. And how will that affect future development? How will that affect the growth in that area? I would suggest probably negatively. So again, those transportation cost increases have always got to be in the back of our mind and urge caution as we move forward. We have a new thing, prior rights popped up, and the attorney can explain this in a little more detail. It seems like Dominion found a new way to make money.
Always.
Any utility.
Any utility. I'm
basically.
sorry, I don't mean to disperse.
It's just another transportation cost increase that regards utilities that have to be moved for any sort of project, but mostly road projects, where if they have a prior right to be where they are and we are causing them to move because of the project, then they can charge the cost of the relocation to that project. And in a lot of cases, we are the project. So those are unknown factors.
Factors are floating around out
It's
there.
great lobbying.
Oh, 100%.
Dominion's the best.
And additional factors, and we're going to talk about some of those here later this evening. But we have some other pretty significant things that are out that could potentially should be on our radar screen and be aware of. We should be accounting for moving forward. So with that, that is the numbers inside the budget. I am available for any questions. Madam Mayor, I see my.
Thank you. Questions and comments? Yes, sir.
Just a comment, like the coronavirus, I mean, I know it's in the news, but obviously you have to be prepared for this. I'm telling you at my level, dealing with, I'm having meetings now, and one of the reasons why I was interrupted, they're working on social distancing in regards, that's what it's being called, in regards to minimal contact, in regards to actually working from home and putting virtual desktops at different locations, because they have to worry about, fail-safes in case there's, population issues in regards to this happening. So this is a real, it's a real threat to what's going on, and the stock market's showing it, but the federal government has moved timelines on a lot of things because of this. So just, it's not a bullet point, it's a serious thing.
And we're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I met with key staff this morning about our business continuity plans and updating them. I looked at how we can protect our people, especially our frontline people. Yep. The good news is we have things like automated refuse collection is a bonus for us. If our refuse collectors only touch 70% of the can, or 30% of the cans, that's 70% they're not putting their hands on that could potentially have a contaminant or something in there that could make them sick. So it's things where we've made some decisions in the past that are helpful. We need to continue to be vigilant and have plans moving forward. And again, I will remind everybody, like I reminded folks at the roundtable on Saturday, the public health response is not the town of Herndon, that's the county public health department. We will certainly parrot whatever they put out. We will certainly screen that from the highest peak whenever anything comes out. But right now, that side is the county, that the town has to be prepared to keep its core business functions in place. We got to keep police on the streets. We got to pick up trash, and various other core functions have to occur. Water needs to pump, sewage needs to flow away from homes. We got to make sure that stuff happens. So we're working on those questions right now.
Jen, and then Sydney.
Yeah, I just have a few really minor things. So the $4.5 million gap, it looks like most of it is made up through cuts and then only requesting the 1% property tax
I think the term we
increase.
used around the table was shared sacrifice. I mean, I'm asking the employees to give up a little something. We're asking the departments to give up a little something. We gave up a little something in capital, we gave a little something in O&M, and then we asked for that tax increase to where the sacrifice, which the 4.5 closure was shared around. Again, most years I come in and it's at 2.8. There's always a couple $1 million that we get rid of out of this mix because of, for various reasons. This was abnormal, but it was marked, it was noted. And I will commend, if I can just pause for a second right now and just say the budget team, who obviously was Jenny Tripley, our finance director, Karen Gagliano, our budget manager, but we also had on the team Roxanne Simpkins-Fox, who's our risk manager, served on it because I thought it was a good way for her to learn the organization inside and out. Lisa Gilliland served on it, and she was our large department head representative, our small department head representative was Tammy Kendrick, head of HR, and those ladies rocked. I mean, they even started, I thought there was a coup attempt going on because they were conspiring behind my back to come up with ways to whittle away that 4.5 million. And the things they were coming up with were frankly brilliant. And again, it was great work across the board by the entire team.
Is this the third year that we've had the budget team expand in this way where we have a large and small department head that rotates?
I did that, my first budget I came in the middle of, but each subsequent year I did the expanded budget team.
Yeah, so absolutely. No, so thank you, and that's, I'm glad you said that, because that's essentially what I was getting at, is like, for 4.5 million, and then essentially, because that 1% increase, or 1 cent increase is about 465K, so, not to say we're agreeing to that, but just given what's been proposed, I think that's solid, so, yeah, thank you as well for the work on that. Just a couple, let's see, on page 5, about the refuse, the 180 grand, that's the annual amount?
That's gonna be the annual amount
That's the annual
that we
amount.
will increase by going to $16 per
Going to 16, so it offsets what, the
partially
210?
offsets. Yeah,
Got it.
partially offsets.
And the 210 just represents the increase, not the whole amount, so
That's
that
the
180
increase.
is really a
Yeah,
small
much.
dent in what
No,
we actually
the
pay.
210 is the whole increase to tipping fees, it's not the whole tipping fees.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
the whole tipping fee,
Yes.
right,
No,
so
no,
it's,
it's not the whole tipping fee, no.
yeah,
It's much larger.
yeah, I knew that, okay. And then on page 10, so on the CIP, the 7.7, this is sort of silly, but why is HVAC so expensive? How is it $300K?
I will turn away
And a
from the
commercial
chief,
building.
and I will
Well, I
turn
guess
to
if
John
it's just
Irish, our
expensive.
Deputy Director of Engineering.
Well, that particular item is a little bit more involved than just HVAC.
Okay, and that's fine, you don't have to totally delve into it, it's more just, it's always surprising when those things are so expensive. Yeah.
Making some plans for future use, et cetera, so it's not just simply replacing an in-kind.
Yeah, okay. The town so on that same page, the town security initiatives, it says 300K, but there was another place where we talked about,
Yeah, we
security.
funded 300 and it was the original request was 450.
okay,
So I deferred 150 and we incorporated in 300.
okay. Right, and then you explained the 121 is actually 275, and that's just, you needed 121 more, got it. Okay, I think, yeah, because then I see on page 17 that 150 security initiative. Okay, so that's where that all balanced out.
And nothing has changed from our internal conversations in the material we gave during our internal conversations. It's still applicable here. We didn't alter anything.
Right, and the security initiative was something that I asked about in my budget meeting, was because we're spending so much time and money and resources on our personnel, but we wanna
Yes.
make sure that we're keeping them safe, and so my
Yes.
question was, are you comfortable with that $150,000 being deferred to another year? Just wanna make sure that we are meeting what we
Again,
need to do for safety of our people.
We're executing a plan that we contracted out, and there's some things in the plan we don't agree with. We ran it through our security expert over here, and she kind of looked at them funny, and then there's some things that we think are very necessary. We prioritize them, and we have a list of, number ones and a list of number twos and so on. And I think, given the capacity for us to do these various projects, because that's the other one, it's not just money, it's do we have the people time, the hours, the labor hours to devote to this in a given year. I'm comfortable with the 300. Am I completely comfortable after the 300? No.
Yeah, there's
always something,
There's always something you wanna think about, and I never wanna say that we're good to go.
Right.
Because, that's, a fool would do that, and I would not do that.
Well, we've already implemented some pieces that are prior to this
I was gonna say,
$300,000.
there's so
Yes.
many noticeable pieces that have been implemented, which is great,
And we have some in the works right now for this fiscal year that have
Yeah.
yet to materialize.
implemented, okay.
They're on order, we've done the engineering, they're
Okay.
ready to come in, we're ready to get after those things. But this is in addition to what we've done to date.
And I know that the chief was very concerned about this, and I don't see her flailing, so I feel pretty good about where we are here.
Good.
So,
Yeah, no, that's it, thanks.
Is that it, Jen?
Yep.
Okay, Sydney, I think I called on you next.
Yeah, I had similar questions, but I did want to ask, the V-poll taxes, they were all due by Monday?
They were due to be postmarked by Monday, so the big
okay.
payers wait and drop it in the mail on Monday, which is smart. We
Mhm.
won't have a full number probably for another 3 or so weeks, it takes time. And then we'll start the auditing function after we get everything in. So, yeah, right
Okay.
now, we have 2.6 million booked so far. Recall the budget number is 4.2 million, but last year's actual was 4.9. But again, it can fluctuate, it depends on what year a business is in, whether they're in the last year of estimate, and that's the lowest year, so, yeah, I look every day.
Yes.
Every
And-
day.
and just to remind you, what we do historically is when we under budget that, we allow whatever the delta is above that will flip through and go into fund balance. So the things I'm asking for out of fund balance, some of that will be partially refilled by any overages over the budget amount we hold this year.
So we might pay for some of the things that we.
Yeah, we'll flush through, they'll
Okay.
refill the coffers that we're asking to take from. And that's historically what we've done. I've gotten a little bit more aggressive on that this year, mainly because it is if we're not
We got burned
doing
so
the things we
much.
need to do during a good economy, woe be us in a bad one. So we want to cook those things off the books that we may have deferred a little bit. Vehicle replacement, we're getting a little more aggressive on vehicle replacement this year, getting a little bit more aggressive on building major maintenance this year. But we're going to use this instrument as a way to facilitate that.
Question on the same thing that Jen brought up, the solid waste fee. How much would we have to charge to bring it up to the 210 increase? How much, because it would be like
18 a
Yeah.
quarter, maybe? I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, I'd have to run numbers.
so why wouldn't we do that?
Again, I was sensitive to the fact that we were doubling it, and how that may be received out in the community. And we have never historically recovered all of our fees anyway. It would take about somewhere between $18 and $25 a month to recover the overall cost to the program.
Okay, all right.
So again, it was one of these things where we can look at and maybe retweak it next year, depending on what happens with tipping fees this year, but we can look at doing something else maybe downfield.
Another question is the insurance cuts that we're making, which I completely understand what you're suggesting and think it's good, but given that we are that we're concerned about retaining good staff, do you think elsewhere we'll be providing them with better deal?
No, as a matter of fact,
As
if
far
you
as
look at
healthcare
places like
is concerned?
Leesburg, they only have that mid-tier plan. I think Vienna, I'm not sure they have an upper tier plan in their place. It depends. I think it's how we message it. And again, one of the things I was very interested in when this idea came up at the budget table, and I looked at Tanya and I started to draw breath to ask her this question. She beat me to the punch, like she always does. She's very good at that. And she says, yes, before the budget is adopted, I want to message this to staff because open season starts on April 15th or 16th, whenever it is, in the middle of the budget process. But I want to get folks thinking about it and educated on it so they can make the move before May 15th. And so, again, it gives them a choice where they have some control over their world. And so how we message is going to be critical. The fact that we've done quite a bit to assist the employees in terms of educational reimbursement, what we've done historically to adjust pay if we sense there's a problem, say with CDL drivers and attracting and retaining them, what we have done in that front, how we've taken our lower end laborers, so we couldn't get lower end laborers in and adjusted pay rates there, I think go a long way. I think we still have some capital built up in those areas to take that for a spin.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you before, I've been a person who has received a pay raise that was completely eaten up by an insurance cost, and I have to say I was not a pleased person, so.
Oh, I'm sure, but we're giving them an option, so there is a way to realize that raise back. And it doesn't, the pay for performance is still solid. One of the other things I did ask about too is historically we had a problem with our pay for performance system that was disadvantaging our lowest income employees. Because explain, what does an exceptional refuse collector look like? When that question was posed to me, I went, we need to scrap the system. And we went to a different system, and the next question I asked before we decided this, and Tanya didn't beat me to this punch, as I said, explain to me how our current pay for performance system is working at the shop. And she says, it's starting to write. It's starting to work the way it was intended. So there are still another 2 to 2.5% sitting on the table for those employees to get based on performance. And another 1.3 if they want to go to the mid-tier system. So there's still options for them, so they're still in somewhat control of their destiny.
Can I do a follow-on to that question? So, given that you talked about open enrollment and the budget won't necessarily be finalized till, let's say, the end of April, assuming what we usually do?
Traditionally,
Is that, so, but there is open enrollment through, employees have till May 15th, so we're not putting them in a bind if we,
If
so
there's something that
assuming we
happens.
get it approved by the end of April, they'll know officially what
Yes.
the rates are, okay?
We really want to use those first couple weeks to educate. This looks like it may be coming, you need to
Right.
educate yourselves, get yourselves in position, and then I will caution them
But
not to
they'll
do
have a month.
anything until you all put your
After it's
stamp
put-
on this
okay.
budget, and once you all put your, and you could change it, do
But then
whatever.
if we delay it through the end of May, that would be a problem, because their open enrollment is.
Their open enrollment stops in the middle
Stops May
middle of the month.
15th.
Yes,
Okay.
and that's to meet all.
And we
of
don't
our-
have any control over that, that's a set thing.
It's a set time.
Right,
Correct.
right, okay, thank you.
Signe, did you have?
I'll give somebody else a chance for once.
Who else has questions? Yes, sir?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Very enlightening, insightful. Thank you. Have a few questions. Page 2, just want to make sure I understand the gap.
Mhm.
4.5, is that general enterprise operational or just
That's across the board, but it was primarily general
for
fund.
this year? Or is
Um,
this an accumulation?
No, this year.
Okay.
So could there be some things accumulated, maybe some deferred maintenance that got then recycled back in, and we tried to address those elements.
Okay.
But it's mostly this year.
Okay.
Mhm.
Having said that, on page 4, we talk about proposing the 1 cent increase. So is that to maintain revenues flat, or is that to offset the cost of this gap that we're talking about? Because if your revenues remain flat as your expenses keep increasing, we're digging that hole even further year after year. You get where I'm going with that?
No, I see exactly what you're going with this. It's really truly gonna depend, and there's a lot of factors that would go into this.
And as you're doing that, factor
Yeah.
this in.
Okay.
The economy will tank
Mhm.
eventually,
Mhm.
this year maybe. So again, if I know this is probably premature for this, but if we're not accommodating or allowing for a dip,
Mhm.
those revenues won't be there next year or the year after.
Well, I would argue that they would for a year or two, because real
Right.
estate lags.
Right, a year,
Real
right.
estate lags.
Exactly.
So that's 30%. Where we're at real risk is in the other governmental taxes. And the interesting thing, Jenny and I had a very interesting exchange earlier today via email, where she's historically looked up at the last recession, and it was kind of interesting that our numbers they all didn't tank together. Meals tax dropped a little bit, transient lodging stayed the same. Sales tax tanked, but then meals tax came back. It was a very interesting interplay between them that we don't have enough time to understand why that is the case yet. But it gives me some hope that in a downturn situation where 36% of our revenue is at risk based on economic factors, that we may have, because it's distributed across 3 major categories, we might get some interplay there.
But we're anticipating the decrease in those.
At varying levels.
Okay.
And again.
So you get where I'm going with
Yeah,
this?
I get where you're
So
going with this.
If
Yeah.
1 cent increase is just gonna keep us stable, assuming there's gonna be other hits,
Mhm.
I'm not sure that's a safe bet. Maybe it should be 1.25 or 1.5. I mean, what do those numbers look like in the out years? I guess what I'm asking is why the 1 cent?
Well, the ones, again, when we look at this, the balance element between revenue and expenditure. So
Okay.
we look at both sides of the equation when we're looking at this, and we first get our baseline revenues in, then we look at our expenditures, and we cut those as far as we can, based on those various myriad of factors we talked about earlier. When we get those down into striking distance, then we look back at revenues. Did we estimate correctly? We have to wait for the county to get their assessment information.
I'm assuming you did everything perfect.
Yeah, so all that, so it's
But
truly
like-
a juggling act
I
at that
get that,
point.
I get that.
And then the reason why we said is we were within striking distance of the number. I was out of arrows in the quiver to pull out, and we had that gap of about $500,000, let's say.
Okay.
And that's where we said a cent might be where we need to go. We then went back and double checked our math, and then the cent is where we need to go. As far as your projections, it truly is gonna depend, because also at the same time as economic downturn, you're gonna get some easing of the labor costs, you're gonna get some easing of materials costs, you're gonna see some easing in other areas of some, what's driving some of the need to do this should ease off. So the expenditure side should ease a little bit in that scenario.
I get paranoid just because I think labor costs will continue to
I
rise.
get paranoid anyway, so
Okay.
yeah, well, we're on the same
As long as
page.
we're paranoid,
Yeah,
okay.
we're good.
Good for being paranoid. Okay, in terms of page 5, the increased solid waste fee, $16 per quarter, is that per household or?
Yes, it's done on the water bill. And let me rephrase, water bills of folks in that we do refuse collection for. So if you live in a condo that gets picked up by a private sector company, you would not see that in your water bill.
Okay, and we had talked about water and sewage costs. I mean, is that to close that gap?
To close that gap.
By how much, by when do we get?
We are still awaiting the latest calculations from Davenport, which were due a week or two.
There's a couple revenue items that they're waiting for. So they're almost done, but they just want to make sure they have a full year. So it's a couple more days.
So I guess I'm
probably.
asking, would that go to 15 or 17, depending on that?
They're separate though. The water and sewer rate increases would only be for that fund, and we use the mechanism of the water bill to bill the solid waste fee.
Okay.
So those are, but they're independent of each other. The
I
water and
get that,
sewer rate, yeah.
Okay.
And again, this is part of a multi-year strategy to position us better than where we were. Again, one of the greatest things we had done was put this as part of a budget discussion. So you're in the mind of revenues and expenditures, and you're looking at these numbers holistically. Here, previous years, we were doing these one-offs in August, September, and it all became about the increase. And I have yet to see the person clamoring for a rate increase. Walking up to that, walking in there in a public hearing and screaming, I've raised my water rates because they need to go up. No, the reason why we're doing it is not to raise them. The reason why we're doing it is because it's a business, and the business will fail if we don't right-size our rates. We are the lowest in the region. Explain to me how we can be a wholesale buyer
Right. No, I
and be
get
lowest
that.
in the region.
Well, and that's
I
where.
mean,
Yeah.
that's something I could never understand, so we have
And
to
I guess
adjust
I had
that.
asked for conceptually, where did those two diverge, right? And for how long, and what's the sort of projection? If we maintain, normalcy.
If we maintain normalcy, then those lines will continue to go across. If we stay on the Davenport plan, we're merging those lines.
Okay.
And then we're gonna lock them in.
And
Once we get them,
when
then we'll lock them in.
When do those then converge?
We got a 5-year plan, we're in year 2,
5
3
years.
of a 5-year
Right,
plan.
and it ended up not being aggressive enough.
So because of this, the commodity increase, it opened up, now we're trying to close it back up.
Okay, so we're still catching up.
Absolutely.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Again, I don't want to throw people into the boiling pot of water, because they tend to jump out.
I get it,
You gotta
I get
turn
it.
it up slowly.
Um,
And it could, helps people adjust to it.
Page 6, the health insurance costs. So
Yes.
we talked about the employee.
Mhm.
Are those plans inclusive or not including like family option in terms of addition?
It's gonna be across the board for, we have 3 tiers. So we actually have 9 plans that we govern. So you have three healthcare plans. You have single, dual, and family.
Mhm.
And so we're looking at all 3 across the top
Gotcha.
2 tiers.
Okay. So, but the two that we mentioned, the
Yes.
2 higher tier ones,
Yeah.
those rates are pretty much the same for employee and family
Yeah,
members?
it's the same percentage.
Okay.
Same percentage, and we'll just keep the same percentage breakdown. We're adding 5% to the employee on each one of those individual
Yeah,
tiers
I got
inside
that.
the plan.
Okay, all right. And with that, let's see, I think I'm almost done here. Page 8. So we talked about, I think you mentioned kind of doing things in the OpEx world. What's our current sort of reserve for OpEx, months, quarters, or years? And does that affect, you know, how many months or quarters or years are we?
We haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay.
And that's why I tried to, the first stage was wrestling it out of the CIP
Okay.
and trying to operationalize it. And then we creating a program to where we're contributing into an OpEx reserve is part of that. Eventually where I'd hope to be.
Where do you want to be?
Yeah, that's where I want to be.
Okay.
But it was too much of a culture shock to the fiscal system just to pull out and slam it in. And so I'm going on a more measured,
Okay.
phasing it in approach, and that's what we're trying to do right now.
The more months, I'm more comfortable with. Just, I mean, philosophically, I think if whatever that is, and whatever you need to fund that, I would support.
Okay.
I just would hate for us to be in a situation where we do have a downturn, we do have revenues, we do have these, and then we're not able to operate at the same
Correct.
level of delivery that people would expect. So
Yep.
I'm willing to have that discussion and battle if necessary, so the longer the better as far as I'm concerned.
Jenny's writing feverishly.
Yeah,
So,
and you know what, I've got a couple more, but I've taken up enough time. So.
No,
You
all
have the
good.
floor, go ahead.
Oh,
You're all
geez,
right.
well, in that case, so, we talked about page 10, so is that the CIP funding, were those just priorities that you guys said, I think these need to be done and we'll make those happen?
Yeah, so CIP, the way, the staff crafts the CIP to go to planning commission. And it's still preliminary. We're not sure where the general fund money is ending up. There's a lot of still unanswered questions on the fiscal side of the house at that point. And so, maybe more so because I think the CIP, for a very good reason, is weighted in a very planning way, and we need to buoy it also to a fiscal plan as well, and we're working on that. But, so it goes to the planning commission, they have their public hearings, they debate it, and then they give me back a recommendation. And so out of their recommendation, I'm saying I'm pulling these two other things out, I'm reallocating how we're paying for this third thing, and it's just a matter of how where our fiscal position is, and can we operationally do it? So we're looking at both of those things.
Okay.
Yep.
Just, I wanted to make sure I understood this.
Yep, sure.
No new debt anticipated for this budget year?
Correct.
None?
No new debt service on the books.
Right.
Okay, well,
So
that's-
if we issue debt, it's typically the
It'll
first
be in a-
payment.
payments in
comes
arrears.
the
Okay,
year.
okay, because it just said,
Yeah.
okay. No new debt, okay. That's, I wanted to make sure that I understood.
Well, and put it this way, because of that, we would have to come to you to issue debt anyway and get your blessing, obviously.
No, I presume that. Thank you.
Sure. Sheila?
Great meeting, last week. I think you answered most of my
But
questions.
you got us right at the end of Friday. We were chomping at the bit by that. We were rehearsed. We were ready to roll that.
I know,
mean,
I
you got
know.
the best meeting of the week.
But,
I was in for red eye.
I'm glad you're working on the virus, because if you recall, when we had the sniper, we didn't have a meals tax, but our restaurants were dying. Our hotels were not filling up because of the sniper event back in early 2000s. So I can see how that would be devastating, because that would, our transient occupancy tax as well as the meals tax. If this happens, people aren't going out. But what did you, I didn't ask you a lot about the trash
Mhm.
pickup and recycling.
Did you
You
get
sent
my
us
email
that
yesterday?
awesome
Yes.
thing. Yes, I got
Yep,
that.
yep.
So what do you anticipate, or was it put in when you were figuring the budget? Now that we're not throwing glass in the recycling bin, it's gonna be in the tipping.
Right.
So if 20% of our folks don't put any glass in the purple bin, then glass is heavy, so that's really gonna up the fee. Was that considered when you were working on the budget?
Well, that will affect our tonnage
Yes.
rates, as to what used to be in the recycling, which was a little
Yes.
cheaper
Yes.
than tipping. So
Right.
if the majority of the folks take it from recycling and throw it into the trash, It's actually gonna be more expensive to process
Right.
than in previous years. And that's something we didn't do a lot of time analyzing, because that's hard to
Yeah.
put a finger on. Well, let's get a year or so under our belt.
Okay, because you've only had it since November
Yes, yes.
to look at that?
Yep.
So I just happened to be there when the changing of the bin happened the other day. And when I got there, the flaps are up, and I'm like, I've never seen this. I mean, it was totally full.
Wonderful.
I was barely able to get my glass
Wonderful.
in there, but.
Anybody that wants to take their
Yes.
heavy refuse and give it to the county,
Yes.
I'm 100% behind that.
Oh, that's why I took a picture and posted it on Facebook, hoping that I would motivate people to take their glass over there. I just try to go once a month, get rid of it, and it works. And I figure it saves us money a lot. But other than that, you did a great job the other day. Thank you very much. And I agree, keep the recycle fees only doubling. I think that would be,
Only doubling.
only doubling. I think that would be major heartburn for,
It was a
Yeah.
measure, and it's something that we took very seriously in that conversation.
and I think more than doubling is kind of, that's stressful for people. So, thank you, Elizabeth.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Great presentation. We'll be meeting tomorrow. And then we'll have more questions and discussion on there. Basically, most of my questions have been asked, and then you did pretty good presentation, so thank you so much for that. One question, just because somebody asked us during the community roundtable as well, and I just wanted to add to Sheila's question. So when people mix the recycle and then the trash, or whatever, something that does not go in the recycle, but they still put it in there, that obviously contaminates the
It will
recycling,
contaminate it,
right?
and it will be separated out and sent
Right,
to
right,
landfill.
right, and then that increases our cost as well.
Well, how, when dig in that a little bit?
We have a contamination amount that we are
Okay.
supposed to stay within, and so far we are, so I mean, we haven't seen that large of an increase in contamination, so. But if we do go above that, yeah, we would be charged.
Got it,
And to that point, we monitor it, as
Okay.
Tammy says. And if we sense there is becoming a problem, that's a public information campaign. It's gotta happen. And we
Okay.
gotta get on top of this.
Okay.
And so, and the refuse recycling crew is very much in tune with those statistics, and they're the first to jump up and say, hey, we gotta get some flyers out, we gotta start talking to people, you know,
Got it,
we gotta
got
get the
it.
problem correct.
it may not be a budget discussion, but again, I thought like if we do that, maybe it will, cut our cost a little bit. Remember when we changed the schedule, that we put the schedule change in the trash can?
Yes.
And that worked really well
Mhm.
because people, could see that all the time versus the other
Right.
means were great, but that was the most effective. So I feel like, a lot of people still are not completely aware what exactly goes in the recycle and then what goes in the trash. So if we can just put some kind of information on their, laminated on their trash can and the recycle can, I think that will educate people and make them aware that, okay, so it goes in my trash, it goes in my recycle. Maybe that will reduce the contamination we're talking about and eventually some cost.
We can look at that certainly. One of the complicating factors to that is, have you seen our recycle yays and nays sheet? I mean, cardboard, pizza box cardboard.
Yep.
Don't
No.
put your pizza boxes in there, please. One thing, I'm gonna sell her out, I'm gonna get in trouble when I get home. My wife carrying a plastic bag of recycling out to the bin, and whoa, 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 whoa. You can't do that, dump that. She's like, you're such a cop on recycling. I'm like, yeah, because I have to deal with it on the back end. Tammy would be in my office screaming at me.
I have to practice what I preach.
Exactly. So it's little things, those educational things are probably some of the bigger things that we have to deal with. But we can certainly look and see if there's a more simplified message that we can do, is if a problem starts emerging.
I think that will help people a lot.
Yeah, one lady asked, are we supposed to be washing?
Rinse them out,
Put a
please.
flow chart.
So my
Yeah, a
neighbors
problem
just-
is
Really
it
on
seems to
flow
change
chart.
though
It
over
does.
time, so.
Well, unfortunately, it's a commodity market, and it depends on what they're gonna take, and we get it from time to time too, where they're no longer taking extra, they're taking Y, or remove the tops off your plastic bottles and throw them away, but put the plastic bottles in. I mean, we see that all, we
Is
see.
that on the website?
We have the
Yes. Yeah.
banner
Yeah.
on the website, yeah.
I mean, the thing with the bottle caps.
The flyer that we sent out to.
Yeah, it has all the
everybody,
detail,
that
which, yay and nay.
This, not that.
Yeah, that
Gold
was something I
recycling
was gonna
on the St.
say as
trajectory.
well, because we got it at the round table. And I did go online, and you've got a great little video that we can watch. And it goes to, was it us or Fairfax County? Went on, and it's
Oh,
this,
for the plastic,
for,
or,
for the recycling.
you know, I think for certain counties, yeah.
Okay, but it was awesome, and it just kind of walks you through it. But then, just go to Friends of Runnymede, Nature Fest with DPW, and DPW will be there usually, showing people with a game how to recycle. And they have a pizza box, and if you do the pizza box, you don't win the prize.
I always lose every year.
You can throw it in the trash.
Pizza box gets me every time.
So, Mr. Town Manager, what are you looking for from us tonight?
Nothing, this is
Okay,
just to
just to-
kind of give you where we are.
Yay.
We should have, we will give you, it should have been here tonight. You got it?
Can I reference it?
Yes.
Attached to the agenda is another document, and in it, it's really a summary, it's the numbers part of the
It's the
presentation.
number parts.
Oh, yeah.
And so it includes the general fund revenue summary, the use of fund balance, the general fund budget reductions, the CIP budget reductions, a budget summary of all funds, and then a budget summary by department and division of just the general fund. So, it should
Nice.
give you all the details you're looking
Yeah.
for, and it kind of answers your question of how we bridge that gap.
Right.
So, that's it.
So these numbers are what's gonna start consolidating into the document that is gonna be presented later this month. Just a couple things, you may see some swings where the personnel cost of the attorney went up 30%. Okay, well, that, yeah, what's she doing? If
She's
you
living
recall,
large.
we took 2 positions from 2 other departments and shipped them over to the attorney's office with the risk manager. So just don't immediately react to certain numbers in that, because a lot of it could be moving the pieces around the board where they make better sense.
So I have a couple of questions. Is our goal to have a balanced budget every year?
It's by law,
That's what I thought.
Right.
And.
not just a goal, like.
It's an eagle. Not just a goal. Well, I guess it is
The
a goal.
goal, the goal
because
is
the
not to
law
be handcuffed
requires.
to the budget process.
Federal
So
government.
take an oath now.
So the reason I asked is because of, Cesar asked the question about, should we, 1.25, 1.5, but we need to have the expenditures that we are
Yeah,
going to use
we'd
that
have to
money
find
for.
a
We
way
can't
to
just decide
control that money, yes.
Yeah, become
to
hungry
pad
on
the
hippos.
general fund. Well, I'm just trying to make sure everybody understands, because I've done this how many times now, and I still have clarifying questions. The other thing is the budget, the annual budget, the only opportunity that the council has to change tax rates in the year?
I will yield to my attorney.
I mean,
I
it's never, I have never participated, but I didn't know if that was by
don't-
law or not.
I am going to say that it is, with possible exception that I would have to research, but it would be very, very, very rare. I can't even remember an example.
I couldn't recall one either,
It's like-
but I
it would
have
be
less
highly
experience
unusual,
than some
yeah.
people around the table here, so.
Yeah, I don't think any municipality I've ever heard of in
Yeah.
Virginia has ever done that.
And see,
think
part,
so, but-
and that was part of our drive to
Yeah.
increasing our fiscal position in terms of creating, capital contingency funds, revenue stabilization funds, that we have fully funded, sitting out there for things to tide us through to get around to the next budget cycle, so then we could then adjust things as we see fit. But the strong capital position that we are in allows us that flexibility.
Well, I asked the question because we have changed other rates at different times, but tax rates are different, and I wanted to just get that out there. Okay, so if you have any other thoughts for the town manager before our next gathering here around this table, please make sure you let him know and talk to your colleagues, and
And I'll see you tomorrow morning. It's pretty, I'm blowing.
Okay, all right.
No, you're tomorrow morning.
Yes.
And then,
well, glad you're feeling better.
I'll give you a call.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to roundtable. Who would like to start us off? Anyone?
I just wanted to alert you all to the fact that I went to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority Planning Committee. It appears the learning curve is extremely steep.
I've been on that committee, you are correct.
Holy moly. Anyway, so I'll be coming back to you with any information that I have that's new, but as far as I can tell right now, nothing that they're doing actually affects Herndon. That may change, and I'll be, talking with the executive director a number of times because, wow, that's confusing. I also wanted to, ask the town manager. Somebody at the round table said that they had received an announcement of the HPRV guidelines in their water bill, some sort of announcement. Do you know what that would have been?
Might have been posted
All the
on
people who
Facebook.
would have done it is, they're all giving me befuddled looks.
Well, there's a quarterly newsletter that goes in the water bill that may have mentioned that we are working on it,
But it didn't
But it
have any
wasn't-
deadlines or anything
no.
like that? Because I think, yeah, the
They might have-
person said, you know,
They
I
might
was
have
expecting
confused,
it
it was
to be
something
right
on
now.
Facebook that was said, that was actually.
well, but
not true.
the quarterly newsletter is tough because we bill in phases, and so the challenge every time is making the information relevant at the beginning of the quarter and the end of the quarter. So
Yeah.
there was not a big announcement. I would guess it was, this is one of the things we're working on, please be aware.
Okay.
Progress.
I was
when I got
surprised to hear
mine-
that, and my husband
Yeah, I
pays her,
didn't
so
see
I
anything.
never see the announcements.
You don't read my newsletter?
You have a newsletter? No.
Every quarter.
We had, and in fact, some citizens wrote in to mention to us a lot of questions about the sustainability committee that once existed and currently isn't in function, and there seems to be a lot of interest in maybe not so much initiating new things as keeping people up to date with what we are doing, and there was even some discussion of volunteering, people volunteering. One participant, Ms. Denton, is very concerned about the Bruin Park, the situation in Bruin Park. It's kind of a mess. Apparently, there's lots of dog,
Excrement.
thank you, and
Fertilizer.
the dog fertilizer, exactly.
Several fertilizer.
But not just the animal waste, but also people waste, not that same kind of waste. And some discussion was made of maybe deploying people doing projects to, now I don't wanna talk about dog waste, but is Fairfax County maintaining that? Because I thought they were supposed to be maintaining it.
I will yield to Cindy, but I think they are, but their maintenance of it is sometimes sketchy, but I will yield to.
Yeah, Fairfax County manages the maintenance of that park, all aspects of it.
And it manages all of our parks, or just
No,
that one?
No, not that
Just
one.
Bruin Park?
Not just Bruin,
Few.
Stanton,
The one you say
and
Fairfax
Alabama.
County.
Just their parks, the ones that are.
No, there are parks that belong to the town, like
Well, they're- oh,
Bruin and
yeah.
Shandon, that the park authority maintains.
Oh,
Correct.
awesome.
And do they have any requirements for their maintenance, or is it just whenever they feel like it?
No, they come on a regular schedule, like they pick trash up every week,
Oh, they do?
yes.
Okay, so that must be
Is
it.
the playground the most pristine, beautiful playground you've ever seen? No, but we were like number 100 on the list of playgrounds that were
There are
above
worse
us,
ones.
where they were gonna get us
Okay.
that one.
All right. Let's see. There was more discussion of sidewalks, and I know that, when Jen was chairing that committee, she did a walking tour of the town and mapped out all the sidewalks that needed to be, I mean, she didn't do it herself, but all of them. So what progress are we making in terms of continuity of sidewalks? Is there a lot of work to be done, or?
It is scattered throughout the CIP in various projects, but I'll let Lisa Gilmer dive more deeply into it.
The planning commission actually asked for some information about that, and as I remember on the pedestrian action plan, that was the pedestrian plan that was approved several months ago now, that came from the PBOC. Wish I had that slide with me, but as I remember, 14 of the action plan projects were specifically identified in the CIP. Then there was one project that was actually in Fairfax County, so additional work would have to be done. Fairfax County would handle it, but that would entail communication between the staffs, which is a problem. There was one, I can't think of the details about that. Then there were about another 14 of them that needed additional technical input, basically studied by transportation engineers to determine what would be the best practice for the issue at hand.
So are you talking about perhaps roads that have ditches, that it's not easy to put in a sidewalk, or what?
No, it would be items such as where the action plan might call for high visibility crosswalks.
All right, you mentioned
That you would actually need someone who was an expert in transportation engineering to determine the type of crosswalk and if that is in fact a place where the standards would call for that crosswalk, and if so, what kind of improvements.
So does is the sidewalk dependent on the crosswalk? I mean, how did the
No,
crosswalk
but
come into the continuity?
Well, some of the quote sidewalk improvements are actually concerning road crossings, crosswalks, because I mean, it's called sidewalk improvements, but some of the improvements are actually getting people from one sidewalk to the other sidewalk across the road.
All right, so it sounds like if I'm doing my math right, that there are about 30 projects that have to do with sidewalks and sidewalk continuity?
Yeah, a little.
Okay, and we're gonna knock off how many of them we think this year?
I couldn't answer that off the top of our heads, but I would say that between the roadway projects that we have underway, which will obviously include sidewalks, so anything that's related with bus bays, intersection projects, Van Buren complete streets, all be addressing sidewalk issues. So that's a lot. Then you also have things like the CIP that's specifically addressing what has been ongoing with the brick replacement downtown. That'll address some additional ones.
Like the what replacement?
Brick replacement.
Oh, right.
Anyway, I can't give you, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm just telling you what I
I
can
get
think of
that.
off the top of my head, but those are sort of the things that will be happening within the year.
I think the things that people were pointing out to us tended to be more residential streets than major streets, so I hope we
I'm
don't
sure,
lose
I
track
mean,
of that.
we have the whole list, obviously, so we know.
I'll ask you that
we
at
know
another
what's there.
time. Thank you, I just wanted to make you aware that that is something that has come up every single time we've had a roundtable, and it came up really passionately last time.
Can I ask a question? Did they walk to the round tables?
I did not
No,
ask.
because the sidewalks were ready for them.
Was that a knock-knock, who's there? And I had the pleasure of reading to little children today at All Ages Read Together. It was very, very fun. There was a Dr. Seussy-ness to it. Some very cool little kids at the Neighborhood Resource Center, so I really enjoyed that. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Cesar?
Sure, thank you. Great roundtable. Good feedback. I think the sustainability that was answered. Green space, trees. Apparently, we're being invaded in the Runnymede area with English ivy. It's a concern with a bunch of people that were at the table that want us to do something about it. So I know nothing about English ivy, so I Googled it, and apparently it kills trees quickly. So the more mulch that's piled up, apparently, the more susceptible the tree is to this. So English ivy, control it. I said I'd pass it on. So.
I see Lisa writing it down furiously, so I'm sure John Daniski will get it.
Done a lot of corporate volunteer cleanup projects that involve removing English ivy, particularly at Stanton Park.
Perfect. Okay.
We'll take a look over it.
I said I'd pass it on.
Thank you.
The other thing, HPRB was a big topic too. There's also this email, it's kind of along the same lines. This is about a status field or something relative to the contributing structure. Is there a reason why we're not, or can't, I can understand we can't, but is there a reason why we aren't divulging or making available sort of the status or conditions on the contributing structures?
There's an email I received this morning. I have staff actually looking at it. The problem with status is, and if you go back to That question was asked previously, I've answered it previously, and what we determined was it's hard to do a status when you're walking by and looking in front of a building. And so, how can you determine status without getting a little bit more of a detailed analysis of the building? So we have pulled back from using that status field because you can't do it out of.
That was my
Yeah.
point, right? I mean, I don't think we should be, because then it's a you're making a call on the structure.
Mhm.
And you don't have a set process for.
Correct.
What condition levels you're 1, 2, 3, 5.
Or you're not even close enough to make a determination if you had a process, so.
So I would say we as a town not even own that.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
like, get out of that business.
And that's what I told the individual, we weren't gonna track that.
Okay,
Yeah, that was in an email that I sent last night, and it was responded to at 3 AM this morning.
okay.
And
That was where I was going with that. If we're going to track it, we need some sort of public standard or something.
Lisa's chomping at the bit back there.
Oh,
She keeps throwing, she's about ready to throw
Oh,
it
okay, okay.
So,
The staff did speak to a staff member down in Richmond with the Department of Historic Resources, and they said that if the town staff and leadership determine that they are not comfortable with that particular item on the form, that they are fine with us not completing that particular item. And they understand that at a reconnaissance level survey, how it is difficult to in fact assess the condition.
No, I'm good with that. I'm just saying if we were capturing it, we really need to disclose sort of the process of assigning that status field.
and I question how it was even determined, because you can't, can you
No,
determine
totally.
it from,
Yeah.
50, 75 feet away, it's difficult to do.
Good stuff. And I think the other hot topic was recycling. We're good. It was a good session. Good session.
Cool, thanks. Who's next? Mr. McCall.
I got nothing.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. DeCall.
Thank you, Bill, for taking care of that HOA question. Thank you for
Actually, it's the
taking care of
public
that.
works
Yeah.
staff, so.
Yeah,
they got it,
thank you.
yes.
DPW staff. So, great session. Community roundtable. Very valid and concerning questions were asked, and we were able to answer some of the questions, and some of those I have put it down here. I think the council members previously asked most of the questions, so let me see which has not been asked. Sidewalks we talked about, right? Water problems, especially in Monroe Street. I think it's stormwater management, I believe. That question was asked by one of the residents there, and she was telling that it was on CIP 2020. So is it still part of CIP 2020, or has it been pushed down?
The Monroe Street improvements, this was one of those things where we had some grant funding associated with those improvements. But we made a determination in the CIP, and this is something obviously you can overrule at any point, that when you look at the CIP more holistically, and not just that project, which has a lot of merit, but you look at it in the grand scheme of cost overruns of Spring Street, cost overruns on Van Buren and bus bays, and we have a massive shortfall on East Eldon Street too, we've got to start dealing with, and we're looking for grant funding for that, we look to deploy that grant funding into some of these other areas where it would make a much bigger dent. Then we would look for ways to fund Monroe Street downfield. Again, like I said, in a microcosm, it's a great project and it's needed. In the grand scheme of trying to take scarce resources and apply them towards areas and prioritization, it was harder to square that circle. And it's not, I'm sure it's not what that individual would like to hear, but that was just a judgment call that was made. And obviously, you all get a crack at the CIP in a couple weeks and can say, no, manager, you're wrong, let's move it back. And then we'll figure something else out.
And then the Brewery Park, as you asked, sustainability committee was another question. And then to help small businesses, still there were people asking questions. There's lack of clarity if somebody wants to open the business, still they don't have all the answers and they're not sure where to go, who to ask, all those kind of things. It was like kind of shared by everybody that it's a little difficult to get the information and everything, and I preached in my idea that I shared with most of you before that, why not we partner with Fairfax County and bring them, they do some, courses called Entrepreneurship 101 or something, which I have attended before, and we can invite them and they can give that free service because we are in Fairfax County, and then we can have our staff as well, so, because if they go to Fairfax County, they get information about the county.
It's totally wrong.
Yeah.
So actually, if I can have Ann Curtis, who, her department runs economic development.
Yeah,
chime in.
Dennis has been talking to Fairfax County about bringing those here, so that is in the works.
Right, okay, so, yeah, he shared that with me.
And any questions in the urn, direct them to Dennis. Dennis will be glad to, he's acted as an ombudsman in a lot of different ways of getting businesses, getting them stood up. During the Tyson's Beer Garden, they reached out to Dennis first. Dennis was the one that started ushering them through the process and started moving that ball. So again,
Which
big,
is why it's going so well.
businesses big and small, let's go to Dennis.
Yeah, I met him once I was elected as a council member, and that time I had already attended that one of the training they gave in Fairfax County, and I really loved it, and how can we bring them here? So that's a good thing that he's working on it, and I think that will help people to get more ideas about the businesses and all those things.
And he's very, very talented at what he does.
Yeah.
He truly is.
Okay, so small businesses, recycle, we already talked about, sidewalks, you already asked that question, right? So, yeah, I think, I'm good, thank you so much, it was really great, community roundtable, thanks for organizing that.
Madam Mayor, real quick, sorry, I forgot, I couldn't read my handwriting, apologize. But someone asked about the status of the Ashland thingy. I'm sorry,
Aslan.
Well, there you go. So, the recommendation was get the players in a room, get everyone updated on what needs to happen, because there's apparently a lot of apprehension that the town is doing this or they're not doing that. I mean, let's get everything out publicly that we can, that we've done, that, things that we've documented, things that we've asked for.
Right.
Where is that project?
We are not quite there yet.
Okay.
We need, for Aslan, we have been working with, they have new players involved in this project, and we are working with them to get them back engaged. They are engaged, but they're working with staff to meet the requirements. Once this moves beyond what I would consider an enforcement matter, we can certainly be much more open in discussions. But right now, we did put a stop work order on them. We did do some things that are enforcing.
So we're still waiting for them.
The ball is still in their court. However, and we got in the routine.
That's
to
not
remind
the
them.
perception that people have.
It's not the perception, but it's been the reality
It's the
for about a
reality.
year.
I have a downtown meeting with my key principals, and by downtown, I mean any project associated, and it grew to any project in town that's major. And we go project by project, and that is on the agenda every week, and for the longest time, it was, John, are you reaching out to the representatives? Yep. And sure enough, next day, an email goes out to the representatives, saying, hey, we're still expecting this.
Is there
We're still
any
waiting
way
on
we
that."
can publicly communicate or post that status?
Not at this juncture.
Okay.
But here's the, I think we're turning a corner here.
Okay.
And I wanna make sure we keep that in mind.
I just don't like hearing the town get blamed for something.
100%.
For a while.
Yeah, but it's,
Social media.
Again, difference between inside baseball and outside baseball, I mean, yeah, and there's certain things that I'm limited in being able to talk about because of the enforcement.
I just, perception is reality.
100%.
Right, so
Indeed.
whatever we can do to offset that.
And I have done some things in the back with talking to their new representative recently. We did talk with some of the perception issues point blank with each other, and I told them the things I didn't appreciate that were being said about the town.
Good.
And, but that isn't changing how we're looking at their business, and I want them here, and as collectively, we want them operating, and again, here's the pathway to get it done, and we're engaged in that pathway.
So let's, again, just get outside the echo chamber,
Yep.
and when you talk to other people, we're doing something.
Oh, I know.
I'm just wanted to communicate that. I
Thank
know
you.
we're not.
I think the key word there is echo chamber.
And there's also
because
other echo
I'm
chambers as
not
well.
hearing it like I
For
was
sure.
3
Were you
years
writing with a
ago.
broken hand, that's why you can't read?
Yeah,
Okay,
pretty much.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it is what it is, man. That's all lefty stuff,
Okay.
so, thank you.
Who,
Yeah,
was that?
I'll chime in on that as well. I thought, great job staff again on setting up the community roundtable. I'm impressed that we certainly get lots of the same folks, and clearly this is a forum that people like to dialogue with. We definitely had some new people I had never met, or people that had never been to one, so I think that's always a sign of a success. I would say the acoustics in that space, that was there a year ago, the acoustics are tough, but, I mean, it's a great location, but it is a tough space, and I know we keep moving that around. One other thing I would say about it, because I think my colleagues have covered the hot topics that continue to come up, is that certainly they come and they want to, address concerns with their council members, but almost more importantly, or as important, they want to talk to each other, and they want to hear what other people have to say. So I know we've tried to make it easy on the folks that come by moving us around, but I would love to see them move around, the folks that come, if mobility is not an issue, because I do think folks, because they're at the same table and they tend to hear the same thing, and there's some of that dialogue. So I think it would be valuable to get some rotation of the tables folks are at, just as
Not
we could
wedded
try
to
that
anything on
differently
that front, sure.
for the next time.
I was trying to be convenient to them.
No, I get it, like, I know
Keep that
we had really,
deference to them,
we had
but-
really good intentions, and I appreciate the why we did it that way, but just the more I've talked to them, and I do think they're like, cause often when I just start the conversation, it's like, I'm here to hear what other people wanna talk about. And so if they're at the same table for 3 sessions or 4 sessions, they hear the same stuff, so, I think that might be valuable.
That's easy to do.
Very good.
That's just me, instead of councilman,
Exactly.
everybody else.
Well, we can help them, right, we can, we can make it a little bit systematic, but anyway, that's it, that's all, thank you.
No, that's a great idea, because there's
Yeah.
always a couple of,
Mhm.
somebody at every table that wants to take
Yes,
over
yes,
the
yes,
conversation.
Yeah.
And I always feel bad for the group that has to stay at that
You have to
table,
manage
so.
that, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I thought it was a great group again, and I had a couple of things that people had brought up that aren't, that didn't get brought up, but when we did talk about people having concerns about recycling, I know periodically we do a mailer. I know when we put the calendar out, we have all that in there, but for some reason, people aren't looking at it. I do read the water bill and see what we've got on there, so that, because I know my neighbors are gonna grill me when we do an island party, so I have read it before I go out there.
Be
So
prepared.
I'm prepared, and because this is gonna be education coming up, we do need to continually educate. And the person from, our table that talked about the ivy, also the mulch issue was, and I've already talked to our forester about it, and he does talk to staff about it, but if you've got new staff coming in, he's gonna just have to keep having the same conversation. Maybe we can do some kind of town forester education piece in that letter that goes out, that talks about pulling the stuff. I'm obsessed about it in my neighborhood. I've got neighbors that they rent, they don't pay attention to theirs. So I just go over there and pull theirs off. Oh, they don't do mulch, but I go over there and pull off the ivy, and they just kinda go, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Because the birds are gonna bring it back to my place. And do we have anyone going to NVRC meetings?
Yes,
Usually.
it's usually me. I wasn't able to go last time, so the alternate was gonna be,
Okay.
contacted.
They're talking about housing, so
Yeah.
when I ran into one of the people I used to go to the meeting, and they said, oh, we're talking about, and I'm like, oh my God. So that would be good to hear. Because NVRC, it's all of Northern Virginia. You've got Arlington people, Prince William,
Alexandria.
Loudon, the whole thing.
Prince William.
And I was at one of the Metro Mondays, and they had the 3 economic, no, was that Metro Monday? Or was that my committee for Dulles? They had the 3 economic development heads from each of the counties. We are so fortunate. We have a meals tax and we double or more in size every day when people come here to go to work and then they go to our restaurants. Prince William only has 15% businesses there, so everyone leaves Prince William, so,
Right.
I mean,
Very residential.
Loudon has the same problem.
yeah, so that's kind of crazy that they've got that, so we're sitting pretty well on Herndon as well as Fairfax County with the way we've been developing things. And thanks again for, I got one-on-one attention at the budget hearing.
I think everybody did, because we put them
Yes.
together and then we started having scheduling problems, they just kind
Yeah.
of fell out to be their individuals.
And Bill was surrounded by women. We had him outnumbered, so.
I'm used to it.
There you go. It was great. I was so impressed.
My house, I have 3 women to one another guy. So.
I used to be in the opposite.
Did you have anything else?
Surrounded by guys.
Did you have
That's all.
anything else? Okay. Mr. Town Manager, do you have anything for us?
Yes.
Okay.
I fully anticipated having my sanity restored on Monday, March 9th. We'll have an executive assistance level,
Yes.
which was much, much needed, and it was overdue, as a matter of fact. Her name is Judy Fry. She is an executive assistant serving a couple partners in an accounting firm in Tyson's. I think she's has the appropriate temperament and attitude and focus to do the job exceptionally well, and I'm sure a lot of the other folks working in town are glad to see that happen too. So, especially Parks and Rec, they get Lindsay back the other half.
Oh, right.
So,
Well, congratulations, that's a big one.
That's a big one. That's a big one. That's all.
All right. Okay, so the agenda was amended earlier this evening to include a closed session, so I will ask for a motion to go into the session as provided under section 2.23711A8, Virginia Code, for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters relating to a VDOT transportation project.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and we're gonna take a less than 5-minute recess.